welcome to another edition of TT Online Community Voices, where we equip you with information to make informed decisions. Today, we continue the discussion of financial security, particularly what it might look like towards home acquisition. Whether you be owning a home or renting, there is a lot of information that you need. And to give that information today, I'm joined by Ms. Morrissa Ross of the Ttmf, and of course, Mr. Rajiv Sankar of the HDC. Lady, gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Now, the first thing we're going to do is distinguish the relationship, because often we separate the two, think they're perhaps competitors. But the truth is, the Ttmf and HDC work hand in hand. Describe to me first your role coming from the allocations department, Rajiv. What exactly do you do?
So I represent today the allocations and settlements department of the HDC,
right?
The sales unit fraction of that department. So as you would have introduced me, I'm one of the sales officers, and our core function at the sales unit is mortgage conversions. And one may ask, or one may want to know, what is mortgage conversion? How is it tied to the Ttmf? And the mortgage conversion process is whereby we at the agency afford our current and potential homeowners the opportunity to process a mortgage transaction through our partner Ttmf, in addition to any other financial institution.
So it's actually a partnership, Morrissa. That means you're not solely responsible for people acquiring homes at all, but the process that is following the acquisition, yes?
That is correct. So our relationship with HGC would have been over a number of years, of course, and customers are of the opinion that we only do mortgages for HGC, but that is not entirely correct. But let me touch on what we do with HGC. So right. Yes, you're correct. We come off the heels of allocation. Customers will come to us directly, where they would now be in a position to be pre-qualified. And further to that, we would now entertain the application towards conversion of the mortgage, where they pay off HGC and they move into their home. So that is the role that we play in partnership with HDC.
Beautiful. So now that we are clear that you have functions outside of each other, because you do work with other financial institutions and of course other sorts of borrowing instruments are offered, we do want to distinguish what is necessary. So we'll start with the HGC, because everybody says, I want a home, I go in HGC, but it's more than that.
Yes,
there is a screening process, there's criteria that has to be met. How do we begin the process of home ownership specifically with HGC?
Well, the process of home ownership essentially commences with the application process.
Okay.
What we at the HGC have done, given the times of the pandemic and COVID and restrictions, we have developed our database and our website. So it's more user-friendly for our clients or members of the public to log in, create their application using their personal data, and once it's successful, the reference code or reference numbers members of the public will refer to is generated automatically. It also provides a current applicant to go in and be able to check and update the system. So it all starts at HGC with your application. As I mentioned to my customers, or the advice I would give, updating is important, because we would not have an idea what have changed financially. Persons may change, most important, their contact number, their emails, their jobs, their incomes would have changed. So it's important for our users to go in and update their information as often as possible. So it starts with the application process.
Right.
Once your application number has been selected via our random draw, there's where the screening process begins at the HDC. So you attend a preliminary assessment interview. The information of the requirements would be provided to you by an allocations officer via email. And once a client has been scheduled for one of our virtual interviews, given the current situation, they will forward all their financial documentation, where we will be able to financially assess them. Based on the success of their interview, we are now capable of allocating based on availability. And I use the word availability because, as you know, we have housing developments throughout Trinidad. And it depends on the client's need or want. Someone may not want to go very far from where they are currently.
Right.
Some people may want to be in a particular area, so our customers have the option. And the information is provided by our very equipped allocations officer in terms of what there's available.
Right.
So once they meet the financial criteria, we now start the processing of documentation, where our clients is provided with what is referred to as a sale agreement or agreement for sale. And just some little, basic ideas where we offer them the property for sale or the unit as we refer it to, and the sale price is very clear on the document. So when we send them to Ttmf, whether it be Ms. Ross or her counterparts, they are now capable of using these documents, these official HEC documents, to commence the mortgage process.
So I'm going to backtrack a bit because you mentioned the random selection, the random draw, and that means that it is persons who are already in the system being selected, being screened moving
Once your
forward.
application is registered and you get that reference number, that is basically your key or your token. So when there's a random draw, it randomly selects different reference numbers which is attached to a customer or customers. Because remember, our applications could be either singular, meaning one person, or jointly. Two persons can't use one application form, whether it's husband and wife, spouse, whatever the case is. So once it is that reference number is selected, randomly selected, we now go into the database and get all the contact information to inform the client, well, you have been successful.
Right.
And there the process begins.
I'd like the distinction that it's a process that starts as opposed to a key in hand, which is a common misconception.
Yes.
But for those of us who have already decided we have the property, we are looking at actual acquisition and doing the mortgage now, we head to Ttmf, and what happens next?
Okay, ideally what happens would be, well, if it is, are we speaking from the perspective that AGC allocated the person,
Right.
it means that the pre-qualification process was already completed.
Makes
right?
sense.
So we know that they qualify, this is the amount they qualify for, which is what was used for the allocation process.
Right.
Right. So they're coming in now to start the application, and at application stage, it's really collecting all your relevant documents that are pertinent to starting. So basic things like your job letter, pay slip, your IDs, we want to know your present living address, so your utility bill will represent that, and of course, the agreement of sale from HEC. In that regard, it's really just to make an appointment. Right now, it's an online process for us, where the person goes up, selects the location. You have the options of the officer within the location. And further to that, everything is sent online to facilitate the application process. The officer in turn confirms the appointment and then reviews the document on said date towards meeting up with you and starting the application online, right? Once that process is completed, we move on to the approval. So we submit, we recommend the loan, which is what we call really preparing all the write-up, asking you about, your relevant information outside of the basic that I just mentioned. Make sure we covered all ground as it pertains to credit adjudication. And then we move further now to preparing the notes and sending it forward to the approving team. And after it's approved, we are now in a position to be able to say to you, okay, your loan is approved, let's move you forward, let's have you sign with us what we call the letter of offer and loan agreement, which is the terms and conditions between you and Ttmf. Pretty much it tells you everything that you would have spoken about verbally before.
Right.
Right? So it's now in writing, you accept that information, and then we continue along the process, and the process really takes you where we would now start communicating with the attorneys, in letting them know, listen, do the title search, which is one of the documents. We always do searches. People, we do the searches, regardless of if it's HEC or what we call open market, which is anything outside of HEC. And further to which we tell them, listen, prepare the deeds. Rajiv will know at some point, HEC will be notified that the loan was approved to allow for the deed of sublease to be prepared. And the customer has to now go through that process with HEC, so that when that is completed, we are now in a position to have our mortgage attorney prepare what is called the deed of mortgage, so that they will now be at the end of the process towards signing off and executing the documents. And that is when we would be in a position to officially pay off HEC the balance that is needed to settle.
So we have two distinct processes, related but not necessarily always tied. You mentioned the open market. How does that process that you just described differ if it's not an HTC process?
Definitely, one, you don't have to sign a deed of sublease, right? Deed of sublease is specific to HEC because they're in charge of a bigger development that is subdivided. So they lease it out, and you may or may not know it's like 999 years. So, I tell people you may not live to see, So outside of that, the difference is that we also require valuation reports for our open market transactions. Our relationship with HEC is one where once the customer's amount or loan amount is within the sale agreement figure, we will honor that figure, and the customer will not be required to provide a valuation report. Other than that, it's nothing different. Those are two distinctive areas,
Just those two differences?
Yeah, major.
Both of them are processes, though, and processes take time. So what sort of time frame are we looking at from beginning in terms of application, perhaps, to selection and allocation, Rajiv?
We can give an estimated time of approximately maybe 3 to 6 months in terms of commencing your mortgage application, that is, to actually having a key in hand or becoming a homeowner. And I distinguish both because we have current licensees or homeowners who already would have occupied several of our housing developments. And now we have provided them with the opportunity of becoming a homeowner by commencing the mortgage process. So just in a nutshell, once you are interviewed and your interview is successful, you go through step 2, which is the allocation process. So you are now allocated based on the primary financial data that you would have had to submit to the allocations officer. And once you are allocated, you will be contacted and informed that you have been allocated to this development. And what we do is schedule a preliminary viewing of the unit.
Before you get to that stage, though, from application to allocation, is there a set time frame for that?
There's usually a set time frame where it's sometimes an estimation of 6 weeks, depending on the availability of the unit. We try to get the unit prepared and all ready, so when the client goes in to do their viewing, they actually have a physical idea of my new home, where I'm going to live.
Nice. Visualizing is important.
Visualizing it.
So time frames for Ttmf processes, similar or longer?
It would be different in terms of timeline. With regards to HEC transactions, it's usually also based on the readiness of the development that the person is assigned to. So that goes back into the timeline whereby the customer is able to sign the deed of sublease. And because it varies, to give you an exact timeline, would be a bit tricky, but sometimes it could vary about up to 4 months or so with regards to being able to start and finish the entire process.
And of course, depending on whether or not persons submit their documents on time, that the documents are screened properly and sufficient, because each individual might have their own differences that need to be further confirmed so that more documents are required. As with any financial process, this is why I know this one. So we have virtually explored the ins and outs of home allocation. But when we think of home, it can be a mortgage, but it can also be a rental. And in the case of HTC's applications, I imagine that persons are asked to identify which they prefer because both options exist, yes?
Yes, so we have the option in the application process where you either select new way home, which is home purchase or rental. And again, it's all based on the person's financial assessment that determines if they qualify for purchase, so they can move forward to one of the new way homes process, where we would transition them across to Ttmf or, as I mentioned, any financial institution of their choice to process a mortgage. And then there's always a rental option based on availability. So once our client do not qualify to purchase, they may either get a rental or a rent-to-own option.
So is that automatic? That you automatically, if you're declined, are given the option to rent?
So I will explain the both, or the difference between the two. So rental refers to straightforward traditional rent, as I would describe it, where there's a set rental fee. It doesn't mean that the client cannot purchase and become a homeowner in future, because they are provided with the opportunity. The rent-to-own option, as I would like to discuss this afternoon, is where at the time of their financial assessment, our client may have possibly a short-term loan, and if it was not for that loan, they would have been able to outright purchase or qualify for the entire amount. Now, our rent-to-own agreements, they usually range from minimum 3 years to a maximum of 5 years. So you're renting the unit through that period, and at the end of the expiration of that agreement, you are required to bring in a current financial assessment, which will indicate to us, the agency, that this customer is now prepared to offset the balance and become a homeowner.
And offset the balance, meaning the amount of money you've paid towards rental does affect the principal.
So it's a portion or percentage on a rent-to-own agreement. 1/3 is retained at the agency as an administrative fee, and 2/3 of their payments we will net it off as a deposit. So they're really applying for the balance at their financial institution to pay us off.
Makes it much more attainable.
Much more attainable.
I think it's interesting to clarify that that exists, because people oftentimes only think of the HEC, as I say, to go and say, I need a house, and expect keys in hand. So that's good to note. Now, the process for Ttmf must be different.
First off, we don't engage anybody that is unable to purchase property. So, yes.
It would change the name of the company.
Of course. So rental, anybody who is interested in that, unfortunately, the most that we can assist with is when you come in and you do the financial assessment that, for example, Rajiv mentioned, based on what you qualify for, that they would now say, okay, they will put you in that position of rental. With us, we try to prepare you, so we educate you as to what you need to do. So we say, okay, listen, you have debts, so probably if it is that it's repaid, you would be able to qualify for X. There's the option of bringing on a joint applicant, you know, somebody that can assist in qualification. So we go through that process with you to give you a fair chance at the immediate. If not, we tell you, okay, so you need to have this in savings, you need to do this, to prepare you to eventually become a homeowner.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
A key component that, as we were saying before, Trinidadians tend to forget. Literally, you would have the discussion, but they would outwardly say, you know, they refused man, they didn't help me out at all.
Yes.
So there is going to be the education. There will be the information to better equip you in the future. And in that case, that means you're going to have a lot more clientele, a lot more applications than in comparison to the Ttmf.
Yes.
When we're looking at home ownership, either being rental or ownership, that's a lot more people.
It's a lot more people.
Tell me on a more granular level, some of the criteria that you have to therefore look forward to. Of course, ranges and financial situations differ, but generally, if you're aspiring to be a homeowner, what are some of the key components that you need to bring forth?
Primarily, in order to populate or generate your application, you must be a resident or a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. You must not own or part-own house or land within Trinidad and Tobago. You must also be in a financial position in terms of if you're acquiring or want to become a potential homeowner, having large debts, credit card payments due. Because remember, when we do the financial assessment, we'll take into consideration, similarly to Ttmf, all these little criteria.
Of course.
What most persons have a common misconception, only 40% of your earning or your monthly salary or your monthly income can be used as a DSR to calculate how much you can actually borrow.
DSR?
Yes, your debt service ratio. So, you know, you can't go into too much debt or in excess of that amount, because you would not be able to qualify to purchase.
So there are two things we need to define a little further there.
Yes.
One, home ownership partially or in addition to anyone else. If I am married to somebody who owns an HGC home, for example, am I then not able to apply?
Unfortunately, you would not be able to apply because your spouse is already in possession of an HGC unit or is a homeowner.
Right.
And
So
that opportunity cannot be given to someone who does not own or co-own property.
In the case so I'd be considered co-owner in that instance.
You would be considered
even if I'm not named on the mortgage.
Even so if you're not named on the property.
Making the distinction.
We have a criteria where a declaration must be submitted as a part of your interview package, and you're swearing an affidavit that yourself or your spouse does not own or co-own property. So it goes a little in depth.
Right. To clarify that.
Yes.
That, of course, then leads to other discussions as to perhaps separation or divorce becomes an option. Well, not because you want to acquire a home, but would be the instance in which there's another application.
Then the gravity of the situation will change, whereby now you no longer in a possession of a home, or you have not been given the opportunity. So then you can reconsider your application in that scenario, that setting.
An entirely different application.
Entirely different application.
Makes sense. Now, when we talk about income and we talk about financial situations, as you said, debts and having credit card debts, loans, things that we will all know about in the financial world is one thing. But then the actual source of income, are there specifics that you look forward to? For example, self-employed persons versus freelancers versus persons who are permanently employed or contractually employed. How do you treat those?
So at the HGC, while we're assessing a customer who I would describe as a potential homeowner, there's no specific income because, as you know, we have a mandate to provide citizens of Trinidad and Tobago with low income the opportunity to own a home, to occupy a home. And we would look at all categories of incomes. Of course, you must provide your evidence of income. So yes, we look at the self-employed person, whether you're a seamstress, whether you're a carpenter, whether you may be in the food and beverage industry, you may or may not have a registered business, you may be a small entrepreneur, but you must show us at the end of the day evidence of your income. Now, what I advise my clients, and Morrissa could also speak a bit more on it, you must show whether it's bank deposits, because these persons would not have the opportunity to have a job letter or payslip from an organization or registered institution or an employer. But once you provide to us that evidence that, okay, I'm a seamstress, I'm a carpenter, my monthly earning is maybe $5,000, I'm just using random figures, you can provide us with at least minimum 1 year bank deposits to reflect that this is your continuous income coming in. So yes, we look at all categories of employees. We do look at government contracts or contracted employees. We may investigate and do some searches to make sure that there's a bit of financial stability. So when you now qualify on our end, and we then transition you across onto Ttmf's end, there's a smooth process that follows.
Makes sense. So that means the person who has that contract that says freelance or is only set for a 5-year period, they can, in fact, apply.
They can, and we will even go a bit further to offer them the opportunity to bring on a joint person. So let's say the application is just in his name only, but his spouse, she's permanently employed, or her income may be a bit more stable. We can join her at that stage on the application. Once she meets the criteria, again, you don't own or co-own home or land in Trinidad and Tobago. The joint income must not exceed $25,000 monthly, which is a major HGC criteria. This information, of course, is on our website. So when applying, you're provided with this information. So once that joint income does not exceed the amount and they fit the criteria, we can, give them or provide to them that opportunity to bring on whether it's their child, their spouse, their sibling. So they can join them onto the application to provide them with that opportunity of acquiring a home through the HGC.
I love it. There's continuous efforts to make it possible.
We try to work with our clients, even in the mortgage conversion process. Many of the public would know me, Mr. Sankar, Rajiv. They'll call for me, they'll email me, Mr. Ross can tell you.
Yes.
We try to give them options. Ms. Ross will speak on the guarantor process. So, in our terms, someone standing security for you.
Right.
We give them options because we want everybody to at least have some form of financial and stability. Your home is basically your oasis. It's where you create a home out of a house. Now, we provide you with a house. We have different unit types, but our customers, our members of the public, they make this house a home. And we would like at the agency for everybody to become a homeowner. They have that title document, that deed of sublease. So that gives them some form of assurance. Yes, I have this in hand. I am a homeowner.
That's right.
So before we can get to that though, Ttmf must have criteria that they look at as well.
Yeah.
So while we have set values, for example, from the HGC, do we have similar stipulations?
Of course, at Ttmf, and very similar because what Rajiv is actually speaking about is training that they got from us with regards to pre-qualifying customers. So overall, we look at the person's ability to qualify based on age, income, and if it is that the person has debts.
Okay.
So looking at the person's income in comparison with their debts, he mentioned debt servicing ratio of 40%, as well as, with us, it's total debt servicing ratio at 40%, and debt servicing ratio, gross debt servicing ratio at 33 1/3%.
So distinctions.
Right. So the gross debt servicing ratio in this case says that you don't have any loans. So the mortgage makes up that 33 1/3% of your income.
Gotcha.
Right? With the total debt servicing ratio, it speaks to the fact that you have a loan.
Gotcha.
So if it is that you do have a loan, it takes away automatically from that 40%. And the difference is actually what we can use to qualify you for a mortgage. It will then represent your monthly installment.
Okay.
Yeah? So that in particular it's a major factor with qualifying somebody for a mortgage. Further to that, we're looking at the person's age, and most times it's the retirement age of the government or Trinidad and Tobago. Outside of that, we can honor your retirement age based on your company. So Ministry of National Security, they have varying retirement ages, 45, 47, 55.
Okay.
Yeah, so most times with individuals like that, they tend to fall short a bit with qualification because we could actually offer 30-year term mortgage. So what happens is that somebody who is 30 and their retirement age is 55, they really just get like 25 years, which is not what a young person would ideally have as a term.
Right.
So we work with individuals like that as well to say, okay, this is the criteria, yes, but similar to Rajiv, we are interested in taking customers beyond to actually acquire property.
Right.
So it's a case where we also look at it and say, listen, if it is that you do have, you're in that position, we can look at probably making a case to take you beyond retirement. So we look at what your gratuity and pension might look like, so that it allows for some type of lump sum payment at your retirement age, restructuring to make sure that after the lump sum is applied that you're well within your debt servicing ratio, as we just mentioned, and that you can pay for continued 5 years or continued 10 years beyond your actual retirement age. So it's something that we do in terms of looking at that as a criteria. Outside of that, individuals would just have to provide us with their basic information. I mentioned already job letter, payslip, ID. Once you have loans, it's really looking at your debts, your credit card statements, your evidence of savings, because individuals are required to still have some level of savings. And I will take the opportunity one time to mention the mortgage products that we have so that it sheds some light as to what would be a requirement and for which person.
Makes sense.
So we have our 2% mortgage program. It's a government subsidized program. What it does, it allows for up to 100% financing. And this is in the event that the property value is, for example, $800,000. The person qualifies for $800,000, we can offer $800,000. That's the 100% financing.
Okay.
It means also that the person in this case, their income should not be more than 14,000, right? Similar to what Rajiv said, first-time homeowners, so you can't own property from before. Individuals under that category just have to provide evidence of savings, right, to cover your legal fees. Because, yeah, correct. It would actually mean about 20,000, maybe 25,000 on average. Property value, though, cannot be more than 1 million.
Okay.
Yeah? So that's the criteria for the 2% or 5% mortgage rate. It's really up to 95% financing. What it says is that the person's income should not be more than 30,000. And in this case, what happens is that the person will now be required to make 5% down and cover your legal fees.
Makes sense.
Right? What happens with the 2 and the 5, they are actually the government subsidized programs that allow for people to start based on your financial status at the highest that you can qualify for, acquire property, and I say you graduate out of the program. So what that really means is that the 2% increases by 0.5% every year until you reach 5%, and you cap for the rest of the mortgage term. So if you have a 30-year term, it takes 7 years to get to 5%, and then for the 23 years, 5%.
So there are certain guarantees, fixed rates, if you will, that you can be comfortable with and budget for.
Correct, and plan for. Correct. And 5% goes to our present open market rate of 6. So it takes you about 3 years to get there. Again, it caps, so it does not move. So as you said, it allows for that type of planning. We provide you with your amortization schedule, which really just tells you where you'll be at and when in terms of balance.
Don't get scared with the words, people. They tell you what your amortization schedule is, meaning telling you what you have to pay when.
Correct. And what happens is that, it's a relative increase in the installment because when you look at it, it's really done on the reduced balance every year.
Reduced balance meaning how much you've already paid towards principal. That's what they work it out on.
That is correct. You have this thing, man.
I'm ready. It really is a matter of breaking it down that small because a lot of people haven't even begun to have the conversation because they believe they can't do things as a self-employed person or somebody who has freelancer on their job letter. They aren't aware of how rates work and the fact that they're locked in. So I really do think we need to continuously have these and other conversations to make sure we get people maximizing the opportunities that exist. To institutions that do try their very best to make sure you are equipped to own, whether it be from starting as a renter and progressing into home ownership, or starting at a lower rate that you can afford at that time and progressing into something more expensive, but still within your financial means. It's all about making sure that the idea of financial security is clear, and that differs person to person. So if you were to perhaps leave us with, I guess, parting words, if you will, as to what financial security could look like for a potential TTMF client, what would that be, Morrissa?
Well, what I would say is that treat your situation individually, as you said. We are in the business of giving you the opportunity to have a sit and chat with us so that you would be able to understand where you're at financially. And in terms of qualifying, yes, great, but for those who can't, because we're in a very difficult time, as you know, you would be prepared and educated and equipped with all that you need so that you would be in a better position, if not today, to become a homeowner, but at least sometime in the future. So just visit with us and chat, and everything that you have to do really right now is just at the tip of your fingertip. It's online, reach out to us, and we'll be able to provide you with that information.
Now, Rajiv, you're going to be a little bit different, because as far as the preparing stage goes, it's more of an application than preparing themselves and coming in. Right. What do you hope that people, or how do you hope the public sees the HDC?
Well, I hope that the public views the HDC and, they take this information today as useful and beneficial to ensure that their applications are updated, particularly their contact information, their financial information. We have social media pages email addresses. So once you can't get onto an agent via telephone, you can reach out to us via email if there are any questions or queries or something you may simply not understand in regards to the allocation process, whether it takes you from applying to being interviewed to becoming a homeowner with key in your hand. We have very well-equipped allocations and sales officers, and we are readily available to try and assist our customers with information, because information is key and important, and it educates our citizens of Trinidad and Tobago on our process at the HDC. Of course, we try our very best to provide as much customer service as possible.
Absolutely.
So, they can feel free to reach out, whether to me, any one of the agents, via telephone, via email. As you all aware, we're trying to minimize really the visits due to the current pandemic situation and the COVID situation. We will schedule appointments for persons to come in if need be, but our social media and our contact information has been updated throughout the organization, not just for the application and allocation part, so our citizens can easily reach us.
I love it. Reach out, get the information, make that informed decision. Home ownership is just one facet of financial security that is not as elusive as we might think or have previously thought. Hopefully, your guys' phones will be ringing off the hook now, because you at home are not intimidated about taking that step towards your ideal home ownership plan and closer to more financial security. That's how we'll wrap this edition of TT Online Community Voices, where we equip you with the information you need to make informed decisions. Brought to you by the Ministry of Sport and Community Development.